The first thing I noticed that morning was the light spilling through the kitchen window, soft and golden, the kind of light that makes you believe everything can still be fixed. I stood there for a while, holding my coffee mug, thinking about how long it had been since Mark and I had shared an evening that didn't feel like a routine performance. 7 years of marriage, and lately, it all felt like a rehearsal for a play whose ending I already knew. So, I decided to change the script. I planned a dinner. Not just any dinner, a real one, the kind that used to make us laugh until midnight, when the dishes were still on the table and our wine glasses stood empty. I spent the afternoon preparing. A roasted salmon with lemon butter, his favorite, candles, the expensive ones I'd been saving since Christmas, the tablecloth we bought on our honeymoon in Florence, still soft after all these years. I even played our old playlist, the one that always started with "At Last" by Etta James. It felt foolishly hopeful, but I needed that. I needed to believe that something as simple as a meal could pull us back from whatever distance had quietly grown between us. While I set the table, I caught myself glancing at the clock every few minutes. Mark had texted earlier. "Running late, big meeting, don't wait up." I ignored the message, choosing instead to believe that maybe he'd surprise me. I poured the wine, adjusted the silverware, and practiced my smile in the reflection of the window. The house was too quiet. So quiet that even the clink of glass against wood sounded like a confession. As the sun dipped behind the neighboring rooftops, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Tonight will be different." Maybe it would be. Maybe not. But as the scent of lemon butter filled the air and the candles flickered to life, I decided that if love had become a habit, tonight I would remind us what it used to feel like before we forgot how to try. From the outside, people would have said we had it all. The townhouse with the pale blue shutters and manicured garden, the framed wedding photos on the wall where we looked so endlessly happy, the kind of polished existence that makes neighbors whisper words like goals. I used to believe it myself. I'd walk through our home and feel proud of how everything fit so neatly: 2 careers, 2 smiles, 2 lives running on parallel tracks that always seemed to meet in the middle. But lately, that middle had begun to stretch thin. There were nights when we'd sit across from each other at the table, phones glowing between us, and I'd catch the reflection of his face in the screen, blank, distracted, somewhere else. I told myself it was work, the usual stress, the never-ending deadlines. Still, there were moments when the silence between us felt like a living thing. I'd wake up before dawn and lie there, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering when the sound had stopped feeling comforting. Our friends always called us the perfect couple. They didn't see the small cracks, the forgotten goodnight kisses, the laughter that had turned into polite smiles, the conversations that ended before they began. Mark was charming in public, always quick with a compliment, a hand on my shoulder, a practiced affection that photographed beautifully. But when the crowd was gone and it was just us, it felt as though we were actors waiting for our cue, unsure of the next line. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos, us at the beach, at his company gala, our anniversary in Napa, and think, those people look like strangers who used to love each other. I didn't hate him. That was the hardest part. It wasn't anger that filled the space between us, it was the quiet absence of anything at all. That night, as I finished setting the table for our anniversary dinner, I looked around the house we'd built and realized something that chilled me. Perfection is the most fragile disguise. It only takes one small crack for the whole illusion to fall apart. It started gradually, like a quiet shift in the air that you can't name until it's too late. Mark began coming home later and later, each time with the same soft excuse, "Just a long day at the office, honey." His voice carried the familiar warmth, but his eyes didn't linger anymore. He would kiss my forehead distractedly, like a man ticking a box on a list. I told myself it was just the season his firm was handling a big account, and late nights were part of it. Still, something felt different. The way he carried his phone everywhere, even to the shower. The way his laughter, once effortless, now sounded slightly rehearsed, as if he'd forgotten how to laugh when it wasn't for someone else. Our conversations became shorter, emptied of weight. "How was your day?" "Busy." "Dinner's ready." "Smells great." Words filled the air, but meaning slipped through the spaces between them. When he did look at me, it wasn't unkind, just absent, like he was seeing a memory of me, not the woman standing in front of him. On weekends, he started taking more trips, conferences, team retreats, last-minute client visits. I never questioned them at first. I packed his bags, ironed his shirts, and kissed him goodbye at the door, pretending I didn't notice that he no longer looked back when he drove away. The bed felt colder on those nights. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city outside, and wonder when the silence between us had become heavier than any argument could have been. I missed him, not the man sitting across from me at dinner, but the man who used to reach for my hand without thinking, who used to call me just to say he missed me. I tried to remind myself that love changes, that comfort sometimes replaces passion, but comfort, when only one person feels it, begins to taste a lot like loneliness. The first time I noticed the perfume, I thought I was imagining it, a faint, floral scent clinging to his jacket, light and sweet, unfamiliar. I don't wear perfume anymore. Mark once told me he preferred my natural scent. So whose was it? I brushed it off. Maybe someone at the office. Maybe a colleague hugged him. But the next day, it was there again. Stronger. Threaded through the fabric like a whisper that refused to fade. Then came the receipts, one from a restaurant I didn't recognize, another from a boutique that sold women's jewelry. At first, I didn't say anything. I told myself that confrontation would make me look insecure, paranoid even. But each new inconsistency felt like a small betrayal disguised as coincidence. One evening, while folding laundry, I noticed a pale pink smudge on the inside of his collar. Lipstick. My chest tightened. It wasn't mine. I stared at it for a long time, holding the shirt in my hands as if it could explain itself. When Mark came home, he kissed my cheek, smiling like nothing had changed, and I wondered how he could still look at me with such practiced ease. The next day, he wore a new shirt I'd never seen before, an expensive brand I hadn't bought. He said a client had gifted it. I nodded, pretending to believe him, even as I folded the lie neatly beside his others. That night, as I stood in our bathroom brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror, calm, composed, unremarkable, the kind of woman who keeps her suspicions tucked behind her smile. I turned off the light, walked into our quiet bedroom, and lay down beside a man whose secret smelled faintly of roses. The kitchen smelled of roasted garlic and lemon, a scent that used to mean comfort, home, him. I was slicing parsley when Mark's phone buzzed on the counter beside me. Once, twice, then again. The vibration felt louder than it should have, echoing through the quiet like a secret trying to get out. I wiped my hands on a towel and glanced at the screen. Unknown number. The call ended, then started again, insistent. A minute later, a message appeared, then another. The name didn't appear, just the number, long, unfamiliar, unplaceable. I frowned. Mark rarely left his phone anywhere unattended. It was practically an extension of him lately, always face down on the table, always locked. But he had forgotten it this time, left in his rush to shower before dinner. The phone buzzed once more, and I caught a glimpse of the preview before it disappeared. A heart emoji. My stomach tightened. I looked toward the hallway, half expecting him to walk in, dripping water, towel around his waist, smiling as if nothing were wrong. But the only sound was the shower running, steady and oblivious. The light from the screen pulsed against the marble counter like a heartbeat. I turned away, stirring the sauce, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But my pulse was uneven, my thoughts restless. When the buzzing stopped, the silence felt heavier than before. I checked the clock. He'd been in the shower for almost 20 minutes. Another message appeared. Can't wait to see you again. Miss you. Then another. Call me when you can, love. My breath caught. Love. The word sat there, small but poisonous. The phone dimmed again, leaving only my reflection in the black screen, my own face, pale, uncertain, and trying not to look guilty for something I hadn't yet done. For the rest of the evening, the phone stayed where it was, like an accusation. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. I wasn't that kind of woman. I trusted my husband, or at least, I used to. But every time I passed the counter, my eyes drifted back to it. The question pulsed louder with every minute. What if it's nothing? What if it's something? Mark came out of the shower, humming, smelling of his aftershave. "You're quiet tonight," he said, kissing my forehead. His phone buzzed again on the counter behind him, the screen lighting up. He didn't notice. Or maybe he pretended not to. We ate dinner together. The conversation stilted, both of us playing our parts. He talked about work, the new project, the travel plans. I nodded, smiling at the right moments. But my mind wasn't in the room. It was spinning around that number, those messages. After he fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone on his nightstand. I could almost feel it whispering to me. Curiosity isn't always born of jealousy. It's sometimes just survival wearing a different name. I told myself that if there was nothing to hide, then no harm would be done. My hand hovered over it, trembling. I thought of every time he'd said, "You can always trust me." I thought of the perfume, the lipstick, the dinners alone. I whispered, "Just once," as if saying it softly could make it forgivable. The screen lit up with my touch, and for a moment, I saw my own reflection again, eyes wide, heart pounding, a woman on the edge of knowing too much. It was almost midnight when I finally gave in. The house was silent, the only sound the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the wall clock. Mark was asleep beside me, breathing evenly, one arm thrown carelessly over the blanket. I stared at his phone on the nightstand for what felt like hours, the light from the street lamp outside glinting off its glass screen. I told myself I wasn't looking for trouble, I was looking for peace. Just proof that the strange calls and late nights meant nothing, that I was still safe inside the life we'd built. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. His passcode was the same as always, our anniversary date. He'd never changed it. That tiny detail felt like permission, as if some part of him expected me to find what he'd hidden. The phone unlocked with a soft click, and the screen came to life. I scrolled to the messages, my heartbeat thudding in my throat. The top thread was the same unknown number from earlier, the one that had been calling during dinner. I opened it, already dreading what I might see. The first message on the screen was time-stamped 8:17 a.m. that morning. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Love you, your wife." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred. I read them again and again, as if repetition might make them change, as if I'd misread something so absurd it couldn't possibly be real. Your wife? The irony hit me like a blow. I was his wife, his only one or so, I thought. My chest felt tight, my vision pulsed at the edges. I looked at the man sleeping beside me, his face calm, almost peaceful, and felt something inside me twist and fracture. There were other messages above it, older ones. I didn't dare open them yet. I locked the screen and placed the phone back exactly where it had been, my fingers cold, my breathing shallow. In the darkness, I lay there wide awake. The words seared into my mind. Love you. Your wife. And just like that, the life I thought I knew began to unravel, one message at a time. By morning, I couldn't resist anymore. The questions had taken root overnight, spreading like ivy through every corner of my thoughts. Mark was in the shower when I reached for his phone again. My hand steady this time, my mind numb. I opened the same thread, scrolling upward, and the air seemed to thicken around me. There were dozens of messages, stretching back weeks, months even. Photos of him at restaurants I'd never been to, smiles I didn't recognize, words I hadn't heard from him in years. Missed you last night. You looked amazing in that dress. Can't wait to be home again. Her replies were worse, sweet, domestic, intimate. She called him my love, my husband, baby. She sent pictures of their breakfasts, a cat I'd never seen lounging in sunlight, handwritten notes ending with your wife. My pulse pounded in my ears. I scrolled faster, desperate to find some mistake, some clue that this was a misunderstanding, but it all fit too perfectly. Their conversations were full of plans, weekends, anniversaries, little inside jokes. He'd even told her he'd missed her soft perfume, the same perfume that had haunted his jacket. My throat burned. I didn't cry, not yet. Instead, I felt hollow, suspended between disbelief and certainty. I scrolled to the top of their thread and saw the first message she ever sent. "I'm glad we finally met again. It feels like fate brought us back." He had replied with a heart, the same kind of heart he hadn't sent me in months. From the bathroom, I heard the shower stop, the curtain slide open. I quickly locked the phone and placed it back. My reflection caught in the black screen again. Calm, expressionless, unrecognizable. I smiled faintly. A thin, broken thing. Maybe this was the moment I stopped being his wife and became something else entirely. A woman about to learn just how deep betrayal can go. For hours, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone screen as if the words might rearrange themselves into something harmless. Your wife. It sounded ridiculous, theatrical even. There had to be an explanation, someone's cruel joke, a wrong number, a glitch. Mark couldn't be that person. He wasn't the type. He was methodical, predictable, careful. Maybe this woman had the wrong Mark. Maybe it was all some absurd coincidence. That thought became my lifeline. I held onto it like it could keep me from drowning. I opened my laptop, my fingers trembling slightly as I typed the unknown number into Google. Nothing at first, just random sites, irrelevant links. Then one result stood out. A small business listing. A floral studio in Houston. Claire Lawson, owner. I clicked it. The number matched. My pulse quickened. There was even a picture. Her smile was bright, practiced, the kind you wear when you know people are watching. She was beautiful, effortlessly so. I studied her face, searching for some reason, some clue. Maybe Mark had hired her for an event. Maybe she was a client. Maybe. But as I scrolled through her profile, the illusion began to crumble. There were photos of her life brunches, road trips, vacations, and then one that made my blood run cold. A picture of a man, blurred slightly in the background, sitting across from her at a restaurant. His build, his hairline, even the curve of his jaw, it looked too familiar. The caption read, "Dinner with my favorite person." My stomach turned. I clicked on it, zooming in until the pixels broke apart, but the resemblance was unmistakable. It was him, Mark. My Mark. I sat back in my chair, heart hammering. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was old, maybe it wasn't him, maybe anything. I whispered the word maybe like a prayer until it lost all meaning. When I finally looked up, the house felt smaller, the air thinner, as if the walls themselves knew something I didn't. By the time Mark came home that night, the candles had burned down to puddles of wax, and the dinner I'd cooked sat untouched, congealed on its plates. The house smelled faintly of lemon and disappointment. I heard his key turn in the lock and quickly straightened up, wiping at my eyes. He walked in, hair slightly damp from the rain, carrying that same worn-out briefcase, the one that had always symbolized his stability. "You're still up?" he asked, surprised, glancing at the table. "I thought you'd eat without me." His tone was light, easy, like he hadn't just stepped into the ruins of something sacred. "I wanted to wait," I said softly, forcing a smile. He kissed my cheek, the gesture automatic, and hung up his coat. "Rough day?" I asked, testing the normalcy in my voice. "Long meetings," he said, loosening his tie. "You wouldn't believe the chaos." I nodded, pretending to listen, but my eyes were drawn to the phone in his hand. He placed it on the counter, face down, as always. The gesture felt deliberate now, loaded. We sat together for a few minutes, the sound of the rain filling the space between us. He talked about work. I murmured agreement at the right moments. Every word he said slid past me, meaningless noise against the steady drum of my thoughts. Claire Lawson, Houston, your wife. The pieces formed patterns I didn't want to see. When he finally excused himself to shower, I looked at the untouched meal and realized it was more than food that had gone cold, it was us. I blew out the last candle, the smoke curling like a question I couldn't yet answer. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed proof that what I'd seen wasn't just a cruel trick of coincidence. As the water began running upstairs, I whispered into the quiet room, "If there's truth here, I'll find it." The words felt heavy, like a vow. Sleep became impossible after that night. I lay awake beside Mark, listening to his steady breathing, my mind turning over the same unbearable question: who was Claire Lawson to him? By morning, I had already decided. If I couldn't confront him yet, I'd find my answers another way. I started small, harmless even. A Google search here, a social media scroll there. It felt almost clinical, like research for a client. I told myself I was just looking for context, not confirmation. But deep down, I knew better. I found Claire's business page again, her flower shop with its curated pictures of peonies and lilacs. In the comments, someone had written, "Can't wait to see your arrangements for the gala next month." And she'd replied, "Working with my favorite partner again, Mark always brings out the best ideas." My fingers froze over the keyboard. Partner. Mark had never mentioned working on any gala. I checked the date. It aligned perfectly with one of his supposed business trips. My pulse quickened. I opened our joint bank account next, scrolling through the recent transactions. There they were: hotel bookings in Houston, dinners at restaurants with names I didn't recognize, flower shop purchases that made sickening sense now. Each new discovery felt like a small betrayal, quiet but lethal. Still, I needed more. I checked his emails, the ones synced to our shared cloud. Most were mundane work updates, invoices, but then there was one thread with the subject line, "Weekend plans." The sender's name was hidden, the address unfamiliar, but the tone was intimate. "Can't wait for you to come home, love. I'll have wine waiting." The timestamp matched one of his late-night meetings. The evidence piled up around me like shards of glass, each one cutting a little deeper. I sat back, staring at the glow of the laptop, feeling both nauseous and strangely calm. It wasn't just about another woman anymore. It was the realization that my life had split in two. The version he showed me and the version he lived when I wasn't looking. I closed the laptop softly and whispered to the empty room, "You've built a life I was never part of." The next morning, while Mark showered, I went further than I'd ever dared. It started with a hunch. He had always been careful about social media, rarely posted, claimed he didn't see the point. But something about that restraint had started to feel false, performative. I opened Instagram and typed his full name. His official account appeared. First our pictures, the happy anniversaries, the perfect captions we'd crafted together. But just below it, another profile caught my eye. Same name, same photo, but with a period between his first and last name. Private, unverified, hidden in plain sight. My heart pounded as I clicked it. The profile picture was subtle, an image of a beach at sunset, a place I didn't recognize. But the bio said everything. My forever. It only followed one account. Claire Lawson. The page was locked, but his profile's preview gave away more than he probably realized. 6 visible thumbnails, faint but damning. A hand holding wine across a dinner table. A pair of intertwined fingers. A woman's silhouette at sunset. One caption read, "Can't believe it's been 2 years." Another, "Coming home to you is the best part of my week." 2 years! My breath hitched. I clicked Claire's account again. Her posts mirrored his, like two halves of a secret life. The same trips, the same dates, even matching captions. Their story was documented for the world, except for me, the one person who should have seen it. Mark came out of the bathroom then, towel around his waist, steam following him like a veil. "You're up early," he said, smiling faintly. I turned off the screen and returned his smile, forcing the corners of my mouth to hold steady. "Just checking some emails." He nodded, completely unaware that in the span of 10 minutes, I had found the ghost of his other life, the one where I didn't exist. And in that silence, something inside me hardened, quiet but final. The time for wondering was over. It was time to see just how deep his lie went. Once I knew where to look, the pattern revealed itself so easily it made me sick. His old travel schedules, the dates I used to mark proudly on our shared calendar: Boston meeting, San Diego conference, client event in Houston, each one lined up perfectly with Claire's photos. A dinner post on her feed with the caption, "He's finally home," appeared the same weekend he claimed to be in back-to-back meetings. A beach picture of her hand intertwined with his, time-stamped 3 months ago, matched the exact weekend he told me his flight was delayed due to weather issues. I remembered calling him that night, hearing waves in the background. "You sound like you're outside," I'd said. "Yeah," he'd replied smoothly. "Just stepping out for air." It wasn't air. It was her. Every memory I had began to rearrange itself. The late-night calls he took on the balcony, the sudden business trips, the receipts for hotel stays I'd assumed his company paid for, it all fit now. He had built his lies carefully, layering them like bricks until they formed a home I thought we shared. But it wasn't ours. It was his and hers. I scrolled through my own photos, our anniversaries, holidays, birthdays, and realized how perfectly he'd blended both worlds. He'd never disappeared completely, never risked raising suspicion. Instead, he gave me just enough. The occasional date night, the thoughtful text, the smile that felt practiced but believable. He had created the illusion of presence while living a double life, like a magician whose trick was convincing the audience he was still on stage while slipping out the back door. The worst part wasn't his deception. It was my blindness. How had I not seen it? The clues had been there so small, so ordinary, that I'd mistaken them for the natural fading of routine love. I wanted to believe that people grew tired, not treacherous. I had called it distance when it was actually disappearance. As I sat there, scrolling through years of orchestrated lies, I understood something chilling. Mark hadn't stumbled into this affair. He had built it, planned it, maintained it, perfected it. He wasn't clumsy or caught up in passion. He was methodical, the kind of man who could live 2 lives and make both women feel like they were the only one. That night, I couldn't look at him without wondering who he was. When he smiled, I studied the curve of his mouth, trying to decide if it was real or just muscle memory. Every word he spoke felt like an echo from someone else's life. The question that had been simmering in my mind all day finally broke through. Was I the other woman all along? I went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection under the harsh vanity light. My face looked pale, foreign. I touched the edge of the sink, grounding myself as thoughts spun wildly. What if Claire wasn't the mistress? What if I was? The woman who thought she had a husband, a home, a name on a mortgage. What if that was all just one side of a coin he flipped between us? I searched online again, this time not for her but for him. I typed, "Mark Brooks marriage license Houston." At first, nothing. Then a partial result, Marcus A. Brooks marriage certificate, filed 2018. My heart stopped. The year matched our 5th anniversary. He'd told me he was at a corporate retreat that weekend. I clicked, but the document required a fee to access fully. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. Could it really be true? I looked back at the mirror and almost laughed. How easily I had accepted his stories, his fragmented schedules, his vague explanations. I used to tell friends that Mark's mystery was part of his charm. Now I realized it was camouflage. In the reflection, I saw 2 women. The one I had been the devoted wife, the believer, and the one standing there now, stripped of illusions, staring at the truth she could no longer ignore. The line between us had blurred. When Mark came into the room, toweling his hair, he smiled. "You okay?" I nodded slowly, my face composed. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my temple, the gesture soft, familiar, cruel. As he turned away, I caught our reflection together in the mirror, his arm around me, his smile easy, and I thought, this is what betrayal looks like when it wears your husband's face. The decision came without warning, sharp, instinctive, like the moment before a storm breaks. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in my hand. The number was still there in my call history. That string of digits that had haunted me for days. Unknown number. But now it had a name. Claire Lawson. I had spent nights studying her face, memorizing the curve of her smile, the glint in her eyes, the unshakable confidence of a woman who believed her life was secure. I wanted to hear her voice. I needed to. Maybe I wanted her to slip to say something that would prove she wasn't who she pretended to be. Maybe I wanted her to tell me the truth that Mark wouldn't. My thumb hovered over the call button, and for a moment I thought I'd lose my nerve. Then I pressed it. The line rang twice before a voice answered, soft, composed, almost kind. Hello? I swallowed. Hi. Is this Claire Lawson? A pause, then a faint smile in her tone. Yes. Who's this? My pulse hammered. This is Elena. I hesitated, searching for a reason that didn't sound insane. I work with Mark. The air went still. Then she laughed lightly, the sound so effortless it chilled me. Oh, Mark's assistant? My grip on the phone tightened. Something like that, I whispered. Her voice softened. He's told me about you, I think. You're the one who helps manage his schedule, right? For a second, I couldn't speak. My mind scrambled to keep up. Yes, I said quietly. That's me. Such a relief to finally talk to you, she continued. He's terrible at keeping track of things. I've been meaning to reach out about his flight next week. He always forgets to update me. I closed my eyes. The words pressed against my chest like a weight. His flight next week. She spoke with the easy confidence of someone secure in her place, the tone of a woman who believed she belonged. And maybe she did. Before hanging up, she added, "Tell him I'll see him on Friday. And thank you for taking care of him." The call ended. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, the sound of her calm, friendly voice looping through my head. I'd called to catch a liar, and instead found one who didn't even know she was lying. I didn't sleep that night. Her words replayed over and over, soft, harmless sentences, laced with devastation. Mark's assistant, that was who I was to her. And to Mark, I didn't know anymore. At dawn, I brewed coffee I didn't drink, and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through Claire's online life again with new eyes. Every picture, every caption, now held a different kind of truth. There were wedding photos I hadn't noticed before her, in a lace gown, him in a dark suit. His face was slightly turned away, but I would have known that posture anywhere. The way his hand rested at her waist, protective, familiar, possessive. The caption beneath the photo made my blood run cold. June 12th, forever began today. June 12th, our anniversary. I checked the date again and again, my hands trembling. He told me he'd been traveling for a client pitch that weekend. I'd even made him a small care package to take on the trip: snacks, aspirin, a handwritten note that said, "Come home soon." That same weekend, he'd been standing in front of another woman, promising forever. I clicked through more pictures, and the timeline told a story I'd been too blind to see. He hadn't been living a double life by accident. He'd constructed two marriages like parallel worlds, both maintained with precision and care. The Houston trips weren't affairs, they were homecomings. A hollow laugh escaped me, sharp and bitter. "Your wife," I whispered to the empty room. She meant it. For the first time, the question I'd buried deep inside surfaced, cold and undeniable. Which one of us was real? The truth hit harder than any betrayal could. Claire wasn't the other woman. I was. The life I thought was mine. The dinners, the anniversaries, the house was nothing more than the backdrop to his lie. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd erased me, rewritten me into a supporting role in someone else's story. Outside, the first light of morning crept across the window, pale and merciless. I sat there in its glow, holding the phone that had become my weapon, my wound, and my proof. Somewhere in Houston, Claire Lawson was waking up beside my husband, believing she was the only one. And for the first time, I didn't know if she was wrong. By the next morning, my curiosity had hardened into something colder resolve. I opened my laptop, logged into the public record database, and began to search. I didn't even know what I expected to find, only that I needed something tangible, something undeniable, something that would prove I wasn't going insane. The first entry came quickly. Marriage certificate, Marcus A. Brooks, and Claire Lawson, Houston County Clerk's Office. Dated June 12, 2018. I stared at the names until they blurred, that tiny middle initial A mocking me. Marcus Allen Brooks. He had always introduced himself as Mark Brooks. Never Marcus, never Allen. A small difference, easy to miss. But the deception was meticulous, intentional. I kept digging. When I entered our names, my stomach turned. Marriage certificate Mark D. Brooks and Elena Hayes, Travis County Clerk's Office, filed 2 years earlier. Both documents real, both active, 2 legal marriages, 2 wives, 1 man. The reality of it hit like a physical blow. He hadn't just cheated. He had duplicated himself, crafted 2 versions of a man who could stand before a judge and say, "I do" twice without blinking. I thought of all the times he'd joked about how exhausting work travel was, how sometimes he forgot which hotel room he was in. I used to laugh. Now I realized he hadn't been joking. He had been telling me the truth disguised as humor. I printed both certificates and laid them side by side on the kitchen counter. My name on one, hers on the other. 2 wives, same signature. It was like looking at a mirror cracked straight down the middle, his handwriting, identical but split between worlds. I imagined him switching rings, switching names, switching lives as easily as changing a shirt. For a long time, I just stared at those papers. Then I gathered them neatly into a folder and slid it into the drawer beside the dining table. It was strange how quiet the house felt. Too normal, too clean, as if it were holding its breath. I wasn't angry yet. The anger would come later. What I felt now was something heavier, understanding. The kind that left no room for denial. The man I married never really existed. All day I practiced what I would say. In my head, the words sounded sharp, controlled, perfect. "How long have you been lying to me? Who is Claire Lawson?" I imagined his face, the flash of guilt, the desperate excuses, the way truth might finally tremble out of him when he saw that I knew everything. But when the door opened that evening, all my rehearsed fury dissolved. Mark stood there holding a bouquet of white lilies, the paper still damp from the rain. He smiled, that same easy smile that used to undo me so effortlessly. "Hey, stranger," he said, closing the door behind him. "Thought I'd surprise you." I froze. The flowers, her favorites. I'd seen them in her wedding photos. My mouth went dry. "They're beautiful," I managed, forcing my voice steady. He kissed my cheek, setting the bouquet on the counter. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I wanted to scream, to throw the printed certificates in his face, to tell him I knew about Houston, about Claire, about the life he'd built on lies. But instead, I nodded and smiled like the good wife he thought I was. "Just tired," I said. "Long week." He looked at me for a moment, then brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "You work too hard," he said, his tone gentle, intimate. The same voice he must have used with her. It disarmed me, wrapped me in the familiar illusion of safety I'd once believed in. We ate dinner together that night. He talked about work, about flights, about meaningless details that now carried hidden meaning. I laughed at the right times, my heart pounding beneath the surface calm. Every smile felt rehearsed, every gesture deliberate. When he finally kissed me goodnight, I almost flinched. His lips were warm, real, human, and yet completely foreign. As he drifted to sleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing how terrifying charm could be. Because in his hands, it wasn't affection. It was a weapon, and I had just let him use it again. The next morning, I called Nora. I hadn't planned to. The words simply tumbled out of me before I could stop them. My sister had always been my anchor, the pragmatic one, the realist who never sugarcoated life. When she picked up, I barely said hello before my voice cracked. "He's married," I whispered. "To someone else." There was silence on the other end, the kind that holds disbelief. Then, softly, "Elena, what do you mean?" I told her everything. The messages, the photos, the records. Every sentence felt heavier as it left my mouth. She didn't interrupt. I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her sitting at her kitchen table, gripping her coffee mug too tightly. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then her voice came through steady, sharp. "Okay," she said. "Listen to me. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. But you need to be smart." She walked me through it step by step. "Don't confront him yet," she warned. "Men like this, they twist things. You'll need proof, solid proof. the kind no one can deny. Her tone was all business now. Start collecting everything. Bank statements, messages, receipts, photos, whatever ties him to her. I scribbled notes as she spoke, my shaking hands steadying with each instruction. Nora had always been the fighter between us. If I was the dreamer, she was the armor. You have to protect yourself, she said. Legally, financially, emotionally. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Start by believing yourself, she replied, and write everything down. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers spread across the table. The marriage certificates, the screenshots, the receipts, all the puzzle pieces of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I created a folder on my computer titled Truth. It felt ridiculous, almost melodramatic, but I needed the reminder. Each file I saved, each picture, transaction, message, was a small rebellion against the version of me that had believed his every word. By nightfall, I wasn't crying anymore. I was documenting. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something that resembled control. Meeting Claire was never part of the plan. It happened because I couldn't stand the silence any longer, the not knowing, the half-truths spinning inside my head. I texted her from a new number, posing as someone from a mutual contact circle, and asked if we could meet to discuss something important about Mark. To my surprise, she agreed almost immediately. We met at a cafe halfway between Austin and Houston. When she walked in, she looked exactly like her photos, poised, elegant, with the effortless confidence of someone who still believed in love. She smiled politely, not recognizing me at first. But when I said Claire, and she heard my voice tremble, her expression shifted. "You're not from work, are you?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, I'm his wife." The silence that followed was like a vacuum, complete, suffocating. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, very slowly, she whispered, "That's not possible." But as I slid a copy of their marriage certificate across the table, I saw the color drain from her face. She reached for it with shaking hands, her fingers brushing the paper as if it might burn. "No," she said again, her voice cracking. "He told me he divorced years ago, that you were gone." Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away and reached for her purse. From it, she pulled her phone and began scrolling furiously. "You need to see this," she said, turning the screen toward me. Photos. Their wedding day, him in a gray suit, her in white, his arm wrapped around her waist. Another of their home, a 2-story house with blue shutters. "Our home," she said softly, "in Houston." Then she swiped again, and my breath caught. A little girl, no older than 5, with dark curls and Mark's unmistakable eyes. "This is Mia," Claire whispered. "Our daughter." The world tilted. My stomach lurched. She looked so much like him that it felt like looking into the face of his betrayal made flesh. Neither of us spoke for a long time. 2 women, 2 versions of the same story, sitting across from each other in stunned disbelief. Finally, Claire exhaled shakily. "He told me I was his only one." I met her eyes. "He told me the same thing." And in that moment, the lie stopped belonging to just one of us. It belonged to both. 6 years. That was how long he had been living. 2 lives, 2 homes, 2 wives, 2 versions of himself. The number sat in my mind like a stone, heavy and immovable. Claire and I pieced it together slowly, through calendars, photos, and dates that lined up with surgical precision. He had been splitting his time, alternating weekends and holidays, like a man running a private schedule of deceit. When he told me he had late meetings, he was driving 3 hours south to Houston. When he said he was flying out for work, he was slipping into another bed in another house with another family. He'd been there for Mia's birth, her first steps, her birthdays. Claire had photos, candles, balloons, his hand holding hers as she blew out 5 tiny flames. I stared at those images until I couldn't breathe. I thought of all the times he'd returned home exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, claiming endless stress. I'd held him, believing he was overworked, never realizing he was just tired from living 2 lives at once. He'd mastered it so completely that I wondered how much of our life had ever been real. Every anniversary, every kiss, every moment of tenderness, now felt staged, rehearsed for whichever audience he was playing to that day. Claire showed me his travel patterns, perfectly overlapping with his absences from me. She had been just as fooled, believing his Austin office was part of his company's expansion. We sat in that cafe until the light began to fade, both women staring at a map of a man who had mapped us both. When she left, she squeezed my hand. "He can't keep this up," she said. "He's going to break." But what she didn't realize was that he just left the pieces for us to carry. That night, I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred through my tears, every memory shifting into a lie. 6 years. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a lifetime rewritten without my consent. I didn't know what scared me more, the deceit itself, or the calm with which he had lived it. The man beside me every night wasn't my husband. He was a stranger wearing his face. Something shifted between us after that. He sensed it before I said a word. Maybe it was the way I looked at him now, or the silence that stretched longer between our conversations. Mark had always been intuitive when it came to control. He could read a room, a face, a breath. And when he felt it slipping, he didn't confront me. He managed me. At first, it was subtle. "You seem distracted lately," he said one night, stirring his drink at the counter. "Everything okay?" His tone was gentle, concerned, but his eyes were sharp, searching. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just work." He nodded, studying me like a problem to solve. The next day, he texted me more than usual. "Love you. Miss your smile. Can't wait for dinner tonight." Messages that once would have melted me now read like tactics. He was checking my reactions, re-establishing the script. When I didn't play along, the tone shifted. "You've been distant. Are we okay?" I told him, yes, we were fine. That was when the gaslighting began. One night, I came home to find his phone sitting openly on the table, unlocked, as if by accident. The same phone he guarded like a limb. "Forgot to charge it," he said casually, watching me. "You can check it if you want. I have nothing to hide." His words dripped with false innocence, daring me to look, to make myself the paranoid wife. I didn't touch it. He smiled faintly, victorious. Later, when I didn't respond to his affection, he sighed and said, "I don't know what's gotten into you lately. You've been so cold. It's like you don't trust me." Trust. The word sliced through me. He used it like a weapon now, turning my awareness against me, making my truth feel like madness. It was manipulation in its purest form, soft, practiced, and deliberate. I began to write everything down in a notebook Nora had given me. Every conversation, every inconsistency, every shift in his tone. It was my way of staying grounded, of reminding myself that I wasn't losing my mind. He was trying to make me believe I was. He still kissed me goodnight, still whispered "I love you" before turning away. But now I could hear the machinery behind it, the rehearsed lines, the control. And as I watched him drift into sleep, I realized something crucial. The man who had mastered 2 lives wasn't afraid of being caught. He was afraid of losing power. And that was exactly what I intended to take from him. Forgiveness was my disguise. I learned quickly that nothing disarms a liar faster than the illusion of trust. So I gave him exactly what he wanted: my softness, my laughter, my quiet acceptance. I told him I'd been stressed lately, that I'd overthought things, that I just wanted us to feel close again. His eyes softened instantly, relief flickering through them. He reached for my hand, kissed it, and whispered, "I missed you." I smiled. "Then let's start over." That was how the idea of a second honeymoon was born. A short getaway. Just the 2 of us, no work, no distractions. He loved the suggestion, almost too much. "Maybe we needed this," he said, pulling me into his arms. "We've been so busy lately." I nodded against his chest, pretending to agree. What he didn't know was that every word I spoke, every touch I returned, was calculated. Over the next few days, I made the arrangements. I told him I'd already booked the cabin, a secluded lakeside property just a few hours from Austin. In reality, Nora had helped me rent a different one nearby, one equipped with a hidden camera system. She insisted we record everything, not just to expose his lies, but to protect me if things turned ugly. He's a manipulator, she'd warned. You'll need evidence that can't be argued away. While packing, I slipped my notebook between my clothes, along with a small USB drive containing screenshots, photos, and both marriage certificates. It wasn't just a vacation bag, it was a case file. Mark, oblivious, was in a good mood again, humming as he folded shirts, kissing my cheek as if the world had forgiven him. I watched him with a strange detachment, like studying a stranger. The guilt, if he had any, never showed. He was too skilled for that. As we drove out of the city, he talked about the lake, about how he couldn't wait to relax, to reconnect. His hand found mine across the console, and I let it stay there, forcing my heartbeat to steady. He didn't know it, but the stage was already set. This trip wasn't for healing. It was for truth. And this time, I would be the one writing the ending. I planned it down to the smallest detail, the candles, the meal, even the playlist. Everything looked exactly like the dinner he'd missed months ago, the one that started all of this. The irony wasn't lost on me. Same tablecloth from Florence. Same wine. Same song Etta James crooning softly in the background. The scent of roasted salmon and lemon butter filled the air, familiar and haunting all at once. Mark looked around the cabin smiling. "You really went all out," he said. "It feels like the old days." "That's the point," I replied, setting the wine down. He raised his glass toward me. "To second chances," he said warmly. "To second chances," I echoed, though my voice carried a weight he couldn't hear. We ate, talked, even laughed. The conversation was easy, almost natural. For a moment, I caught myself slipping, wanting to believe that maybe we could still fix it. But then I looked at his phone face down beside his plate, vibrating once, then again, and the illusion shattered. He didn't even flinch, just ignored it, smiling at me. I excused myself to the kitchen, pretending to refill our glasses. In reality, I slipped my hand into his jacket on the chair and pulled out the second phone, the one I'd suspected he carried but had never seen. It unlocked with the same passcode as before. My chest tightened as I saw the most recent message. "See you soon, love. Can't wait for the weekend." From Claire. My reflection in the glass door looked eerily calm, almost serene. I took a deep breath, then returned to the table, placing the phone beside his plate. "You forgot this," I said softly. His smile faltered, just slightly. "Oh, thanks," he said, but his voice was different now, cautious. I lifted my wine glass. "Do you remember this dinner?" He hesitated. "Of course, our anniversary." I smiled thinly. "Funny. I thought you were in Houston that night." His hand froze on the table. For the first time in months, I saw something real cross his face, not charm, not confidence. Fear. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, still and silent, as if holding its breath for what came next. Everything looked perfect again. Almost, but perfection, I'd learned, was just the moment before everything breaks. Dessert was cooling on the counter, a slice of chocolate cake that neither of us would ever eat. The candles had burned low, dripping wax onto the linen like slow tears. I poured him one last glass of wine, steadying my hand so he wouldn't see it tremble. "You should check your phone," I said casually, sliding it toward him across the table. He frowned, glancing down. The screen was lit. The messages from Claire filled the display, her name bold at the top. Her last text glowing in the thread. "Can't wait to see you soon. Love you, your wife." He froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he laughed. A weak, breathless sound. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I lifted the remote and pressed a button. Behind him, the television flickered to life. The same message as his words, her replies appeared on the screen, magnified in glaring white against the dark. The silence stretched like a wire between us. His chair scraped against the floor as he stood abruptly. "Elena, what the hell is this? You've been what? Spying on me?" I stayed seated, my voice quiet, steady. "No, just reading what you wrote." His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting. Claire's a client. She jokes around. It's nothing." I tilted my head slightly. "Nothing? You married her." He blinked, the color draining from his face. "What?" I reached for the folder on the table and slid the printed marriage certificates toward him. Marcus Allen Brooks, I said softly. You really should have changed your middle name. He stared down at the papers, his mouth opening, then closing again. A muscle twitched in his jaw. For the first time, his voice cracked. Elena, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You built 2 lives, 2 homes, 2 wives, and you thought you could keep them both. He stepped toward me, his hands raised in a pleading gesture. It's not like that. It's complicated. I love you, both of you. I didn't mean for... Stop. My voice sliced through his. Don't you dare use that word. He stood there, chest heaving, trapped in the lie that had finally cornered him. I watched him, expressionless, feeling strangely detached, as if I were outside my own life, watching the final scene of a story I already knew the ending to. He tried everything. Denial, outrage, pity. It was almost fascinating to watch, the way his voice shifted through stages of damage control, like a man cycling through rehearsed lines. It's not what it looks like. You're twisting things. I only married her for business reasons. Each lie was worse than the one before. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply picked up my phone, hit record, and set it on the table between us. The small red light blinked steadily, catching every word. Tell me about Claire, I said. My tone was even polite. It unnerved him. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. Elena, listen, things got messy. I didn't plan for any of this. How long? He hesitated. A few years. 6, I corrected, reading from my notebook. You met her 6 years ago at a company event in Houston. You married her in 2018. The same year you told me you were on a corporate retreat. He flinched. You've been spying. Documenting, I interrupted calmly. Bank transfers, hotel receipts, photos. Do you want me to go on? He sank into a chair, his confidence unraveling. Elena, please, I love you. You were never supposed to find out like this. I almost laughed. Supposed to? I leaned forward. You built an entire life behind my back. You have a child, Mark. A daughter. Did you think I'd never know? His head dropped into his hands. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he whispered. But you did, I said, my voice steady. Every single day you chose to lie. He looked up then, eyes glassy, voice desperate. If you ever loved me, please don't destroy me. I met his gaze, feeling nothing. You did that yourself. He reached across the table, but I pulled back. I let the silence hang there, heavy and final, before standing and picking up my phone. The recording was still running, the red light blinking softly. Without another word, I turned off the TV, the glow fading from the room until only candlelight remained. Mark sat there in the dark, surrounded by his own words, his own evidence. And for the first time, he had nothing left to say. Morning came heavy and quiet, the kind of silence that follows destruction. Mark had slept on the couch, if you could call it sleep. I heard him pacing through the night, whispering to someone on the phone, maybe trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. But there was no fixing this. Not anymore. At sunrise, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, the folder labeled Truth glowing on the screen. Nora's voice echoed in my head. When you're ready, don't whisper. Make sure the world hears you. I started with the facts. Screenshots of messages, photos, the 2 marriage certificates side by side, the bank records, his text to me, his identical ones to Claire. I wrote a short post, steady and clear. For 6 years, my husband, Mark Brooks, also known as Marcus Allen Brooks, lived 2 lives, 2 homes, 2 marriages, 2 wives. This is the truth he built behind our vows. I didn't add anger, didn't add embellishment. Truth doesn't need it. I attached the documents and hit post. Within minutes, it spread. Comments multiplied, notifications flooded in. People tagged others, reshared, speculated. His full name was trending locally by noon. Then something unexpected happened. Claire messaged me. It's time, she wrote. An hour later, her own post appeared. Photos of their wedding, copies of messages, and a statement of her own. To the woman who unknowingly shared her life with mine, I see you. To the man who made us both believe in lies, I hope truth is the only thing left of you. It went viral within hours. His colleagues saw it, His company saw it. His family saw it. Screenshots began circulating through work emails, tagged with disbelief and outrage. Did you know? Is this real? He has 2 wives? By evening, the 2 of us, his wives, had done what 6 years of deceit couldn't do. We'd torn down the walls he built and dragged his perfect double life into the light. When he finally came out of the living room, his eyes hollow, phone buzzing endlessly, he looked at me like a man who had seen his own obituary. "You did this," he whispered. I met his gaze and said, "No, you did. I just told the truth." The next days unfolded like slow-motion wreckage. His company suspended him first, citing ethical and legal concerns. By the end of the week, they terminated his contract entirely. Word spread fast, clients withdrew, colleagues distanced themselves, friends stopped answering his calls. The man who once prided himself on control was now a headline. Claire filed for annulment immediately. Her lawyer's statement was crisp, almost cold. Mrs. Lawson seeks to void a marriage entered into under fraudulent identity. I didn't blame her. She had a child to protect. I filed my own paperwork the same morning divorce, followed by a civil claim for fraud and emotional damages. It wasn't about money. It was about accountability, about putting his name, his real name, in black ink under the weight of the truth he'd run from. The house that had once felt too perfect now stood hollow. I boxed his things methodically: ties, cufflinks, the wedding ring he'd left on the nightstand. Each item went into a separate pile marked return, donate, burn. The media picked it up within days. Executive exposed for bigamy scandal. His photo appeared beside words like betrayal, double life, fraudulent marriage. The internet turned him into a spectacle, but I didn't read the comments. I didn't need validation, just quiet. When the legal notice arrived, confirming his second marriage had been annulled, I sat at the same table where this story began, the table I'd once set for a dinner he never came home for. I signed my own divorce petition beneath the fluorescent kitchen light, my signature steady, final. Mark tried to call once after that. I let it ring, then turned the phone face down. The sound didn't hurt anymore. Later that night, Nora texted me a single line. He built his life on lies. You built yours on truth. That's the difference. I looked around the empty room, at the packed boxes, at the hollow echo of what used to be love, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The man who had once lived 2 lives now had none, and I, after losing everything, finally had mine back. The house looked different once everything was gone. The walls that had held laughter, secrets, and silence were bare now, the faint outlines of old picture frames marking where our life had once hung. I'd sold it quickly, faster than I expected. A young couple had come to see it, their faces full of hope, the kind that hadn't yet learned what love could cost. They called it perfect. I handed them the keys without hesitation. Let them have the illusion. I was done living inside one. On the final night, I sat alone in the empty living room, the same place where I'd once waited for him with candles lit and dinner growing cold. The same table stood in the center of the room, though now it was stripped of ceremony, no flowers, no silverware, just 2 plates from the last dinner we'd shared. I hadn't thrown them out. Maybe part of me needed to see them there. A quiet memorial to everything that had died long before I acknowledged it. The silence was heavy, but not cruel. It was the kind that comes after a storm, when the debris settles and the air smells new. I ran my fingers along the table's edge, remembering the night I first set it for him, the night I'd still believed a meal could fix a marriage. Outside, the sky dimmed to violet. I opened the window and let the cool air fill the room. It no longer felt haunted, just empty, like a blank page. Somewhere in that emptiness, I found peace. The anger, the confusion, the ache they had burned away, leaving only clarity. I stood up, looked around one last time, and whispered, "It's over." Then I turned off the lights and walked out. The echo of my footsteps, the only sound that followed. The front door closed behind me with a soft click, sealing in the ghosts of a life that no longer belonged to me. Months passed quietly, like a deep exhale, after years of holding my breath. My days became simple again: coffee in the morning, work that filled my time but not my thoughts, Evenings spent in a small apartment that smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. The world had moved on from Mark's scandal. His name still floated occasionally through headlines, but I didn't click anymore. I'd stopped looking for closure in someone else's consequences. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind my balcony, my laptop pinged with a new email. The sender's name made my breath catch. Claire Lawson. I hesitated before opening it. The message was short, only one line. Thank you for the truth. I thought I was the only one. For a moment, I just stared at it. The woman who had unknowingly shared my life. My husband. My grief now reaching out across the wreckage, with something that wasn't blame, but recognition. I smiled faintly, then began to type. We both were until we stopped being. I hit send, and closed the laptop. The room around me was quiet, except for the hum of the city outside, steady and alive. I looked out the window, watching the last streak of sunlight fade. For the first time in years, I didn't feel broken or abandoned. I felt free. The lies were gone. The house was gone. The man was gone. But I remained. Whole, steady, real. I took a deep breath, letting it fill me, then whispered to no one in particular. Finally. And this time, the silence that answered wasn't empty. It was peace. This story was brutal, but the story on the right-hand side is even more insane.